When did seeing Ring doorbell footage make you lock your family out of your house? The ITA for locking my family out of the house I am paying for because I finally saw the Ring doorbell footage. I'm typing this at 4:30 a.m. in my 2018 Honda Civic, which is parked 3 blocks away from my own damn house, feeling like I might throw up the half a talenti gelato I stress ate. I have 57 unanswered texts, 27 missed calls from one specific number, and my iPhone 14 battery is at 11%. I need to get this out before I crack. Seriously, I thought I was ready to post here, but every time I start typing, my hands shake so much I have to backspace 3 times just to get a whole word out. I'm Matthew Coleman, 58M. Yes, I know I'm old enough to be most of your dads, but apparently wisdom does not increase with age, especially when you are drowning in 6-figure medical debt from a cardiac procedure 4 years ago. That debt is the key to everything, because that debt is what keeps me working 60 hours a week at the firm and why I thought the whole family living arrangement was a good idea in the first place. Financial desperation makes you ignore so many red flags you might as well be waving a giant red banner that says scam here. I've been working myself to death to keep up the payments, and that's why I wasn't around much during the critical time. That's the core of the postpartum neglect, and I have to own that part even though it kills me. I thought providing the money was enough. Past me was such an idiot. This whole mess centers on the house, which is undergoing a huge renovation right now. We bought this money pit 4 years ago, and we finally had enough equity and enough debt, LOL, to start tearing out the kitchen and the main floor bathroom. This is why everyone is packed into the upper levels and the living room smells perpetually like sawdust and 2-week-old Chipotle leftovers. The people currently crammed into my space besides me are my daughter, Kimberly Flores, 30F, her husband, Terry MacLeod, 54M, and her father-in-law, George Flores, 75M. Oh, and their brand new baby, Leo. Leo is 3 months old and the actual center of the universe, and the only reason I let this circus start in the first place. Kimberly, 30F, is my only daughter, and she is exhausting. She's smart, but she's totally enmeshed with her father-in-law, George. George Flores, 75M, is a total nightmare. He's retired, but he acts like he owns the place. He constantly makes comments about how things were done in his day, which is code for being a total discrimination enabler. He judges everything, from the $43.67 Trader Joe's grocery bill, too much avocado toast, apparently, to my work hours. I swear he's never met a boundary he didn't try to stomp all over. Kimberly and Terry MacLeod, 54M, had the baby 3 months ago, and they moved in with me right after the delivery because their 1-bedroom apartment near downtown was just too small for a newborn and all of George's baggage. They swore it was temporary. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Terry, 54M, her husband, is complicated. He used to be a financial advisor, lost his license for sketchy practices, and now he is a YouTube vlogger. Yes, really. He makes videos about financial freedom through minimalist living while simultaneously demanding I pay for the premium Disney Plus package. He has a beat-up Toyota Corolla that he can barely keep running, but he bought George a $500 Apple Watch for Christmas. The math wasn't mathing, you know? Initially, Terry and I got along okay, mostly because I was working so much I only saw him for 5 minutes a day. But lately, things have gotten weird. He started doing these intense vlogs about the renovation, and he kept talking about how he was managing the project. I just let it slide, honestly, because I was exhausted. My work schedule has been brutal. I had to take a few sick days back in October when I thought my heart stress was acting up, and I was terrified of falling behind on the medical debt. We're talking $12,000 annual interest payments alone. I can't afford to miss a payment or they seize everything. Everything I do, including letting these people live rent-free in my house, is designed to keep me above water. The understanding was simple. Kimberly and Terry would cover the utilities, and George would watch the baby while they both looked for better jobs. I cover the $1,247 mortgage payment and all the renovation costs. The complications started when I found the first charge. Last Tuesday at 11:47 a.m., I was reviewing my bank statements on a 10-minute break between Zoom meetings. I had ate that day back-to-back and saw a $200 withdrawal from an ATM near Main Street. I hadn't pulled cash. I only use cash for the coffee shop on Main Street sometimes, and I knew that $4 a day habit wouldn't add up to $200. I asked Kimberly about it that evening around 5:30 p.m. right before I went back to the office to put in more overtime unpaid NGL. I said, "Hey, did you or Terry take cash out of my account? I saw a $200 withdrawal." Kimberly was feeding Leo and just sighed, making a production of it. She said, "Oh, that was probably George. He needed to pay the electrician. Cash only, you know how these contractors are." I should have pushed it. I should have asked for a receipt. But she looked so tired, and I knew she was tired. She was literally doing all the baby stuff, which is another huge part of this that I just said, "Okay, just keep track of it." Then came the second clue 2 days later. I had a text from my plumber Frank saying, "Hey, your check bounced for the $85 charge. Can you resend the Zelle?" I was livid. I checked my account. I was $347 in the negative, triggering an overdraft fee. I had just deposited my paycheck the day before. How was I negative? I saw another $200 withdrawal plus a $150 Zelle payment to Brian P. I confronted Kimberly, 30F, that night. This time, George, 75M, was sitting right there, watching some terrible true crime documentary on Netflix, wearing the huge noise-canceling headphones Terry got him. I showed Kimberly the $347 bill and the overdraft fee. I said, voice shaking, "Kimberly, what is going on? I pay $1,247 just for the mortgage. We agreed I was paying the bulk of the expenses. Who is Brian P. and why are there more cash withdrawals?" She looked stressed. She said, "Dad, look, the renovation costs are adding up. We needed a temporary loan for George's gambling money, I mean for the materials. Terry is handling it. George had an emergency bill. George whipped off his headphones and snarled, I needed the funds for my investments, Matthew. Don't worry about it. It's not your place. I felt my chest tight. That familiar precardiac anxiety started to climb. I reminded myself I needed this arrangement to work. I said, George, this is my place, this is my account, and this is my debt. You can't just take money. George scoffed. You're being dramatic. It's $400. You make plenty. I was so exhausted and stressed, I nearly broke down. I didn't make plenty. I was working until 11 p.m. every night just to afford the minimum payments on the medical bills. I needed that money for the minimum payment due this week. I told them, okay, stop using the card. I'm putting a block on it. You need something, you ask me. Terry, 54M, finally walked in. He must have heard the commotion. He looked like he'd been wrestling a bear, wearing a sweat-soaked Lululemon shirt. The problem, Matthew? He asked, sounding impatient. The problem is unauthorized withdrawals and overdraft fees, I said. And who is Brian P? Terry MacLeod, 54M, stared at me. He had that smug vlogger look on his face. He said, Brian Parker, 41M, he's my fitness connection. He's helping me with my new Dad Bod to God Bod series, you know, character development. I frowned. And you zelled him $150 from my account, Terry smirked. It was for a consultation. You wouldn't understand, Matthew. It's an investment in the brand. You want me to get a real job, don't you? This is the real job. I wanted to scream, but I just said, Terry, I need you to find a job that pays you, not one that costs me money. This arrangement is purely financial relief for me, not a side hustle fund for you. That night, I felt the full force of the neglect. I had come home exhausted, worried, sick about the bills, and instead of finding support, I found resentment and unauthorized spending. Kimberly was sitting on the sofa scrolling TikTok, the baby in the bassinet, and George was still yelling about his investments. Nobody asked me how my day was. Nobody even acknowledged I had just walked through the door, and Kimberly, my daughter, just kept saying, Dad, you're overreacting. Terry has a plan. I walked up to my room and locked the door. I changed the banking passwords and deactivated the debit card. I know, should have done that months ago. Past me was such an absolute clown. The next day, Friday, I decided I needed to get some space. I took a vacation day, one of the 4 I had left, and went to my friend Ben's place upstate. I needed to breathe. But before I left, I checked the Ring doorbell footage on my phone just to make sure the contractor actually showed up on time. That's when I saw Brian Parker, 41M. Brian, 41M, is fitness obsessed and he looked every part of it. He was wearing compression shorts and carrying a gallon jug of water showing off his sculpted arms. He came to the front door at 10:00 a.m. sharp. Terry, 54M, opened the door and let him in. They were laughing. Then about 20 minutes later, the Ring caught them leaving. They weren't exercising. They were loading things into Brian's gigantic, pristine BMW that he definitely can afford. They were loading my things. I watched horrified as Terry MacLeod, 54M, carried out a box labeled Matthew Vintage Electronics, which held my late wife's collection of classic cameras worth thousands. And then Brian, 41M, came out carrying the original mid-century lamp I bought at an auction last year. The one I loved. The one I paid $700 for. I felt my stomach drop to the floor. They were selling my stuff. Not just using my account, but stealing and selling my property, apparently to fund Terry's ridiculous fitness vlog or worse, George's investments. I was literally shaking. I immediately called Kimberly, but she didn't answer. 27 calls in 1 hour and nothing. She left me on read. I sped back downstate, my heart racing the whole drive. I was driving my Honda Civic like it was a damn F1 race car, nearly running off the road twice. I didn't care about the gas or the traffic. I needed to get home and demand answers. I needed to see what else they had taken. When I pulled up to the house, the contractor's van was gone and the house was silent. I burst through the front door. Kimberly, Terry, where are you? Where's my lamp? I screamed. The house was eerily quiet. The baby, Leo, wasn't crying. I found George, 75M, in the kitchen, sitting at the counter, calmly stirring a gigantic bowl of Talenti gelato. Where's everyone? I demanded. George, 75M, looked up at me, completely unemotional. They went to the gym. Terry needed to meet Brian for his consult. I pointed toward the missing lamp. Where's the lamp, George? Where's the camera box? George, 75M, took a long, slow spoonful of gelato. They took them to sell, Matthew. They needed quick cash. That medical debt of yours is stressing everyone out, you know. Terry said you weren't using the lamp anyway. The audacity, the sheer audacity of this man. They were selling my possessions to offset the anxiety my medical debt was causing them. I saw red. I felt pure, unadulterated rage mixed with the deepest exhaustion. I had been working myself into an early grave to keep them sheltered during this renovation, and they were robbing me blind. And my own daughter knew and was enabling it. You know what? I said, voice dangerously low. You are all done. George just shrugged. You're being dramatic, Matthew. We'll pay you back. Terry had a plan. He said he was going to get a big sponsorship deal for the vlog soon. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I walked straight to my room, grabbed my laptop, and started executing the resolution approach I'd been planning for months, the one my therapist had begged me to use. The privacy settings max. First, I changed the Wi-Fi password and made the new one 47 characters long. Petty? Yes. Necessary? Also yes. I blocked Terry and George on everything: my phone, Venmo, Cash App. I deleted the shared grocery list. Then I went to the main breaker box and flipped the switch for their temporary living area, the attic space. No more Hulu or Netflix for them. Finally, and this is the part I was terrified of, I called the locksmith. He was there in 45 minutes, right when the sun was starting to set. I had all the exterior locks and the Ring doorbell codes changed. New keys cut for only me. As I was paying the locksmith using a different emergency card, I heard a car pull up. It was Terry's beat-up Toyota Corolla. Kimberly, 30F, got out first, looking tired, carrying baby Leo in the carrier. Terry, 54M, was right behind her, looking smug and energized. They didn't notice the new locks right away. They got to the front porch and Terry tried to key in the old door code. It beeped red. He tried again, beeped red. Matthew, he yelled, annoyed. Did you change the code again? Why is the Wi-Fi down? I walked to the front window. I was shaking, but my voice was completely steady. The code has been changed permanently, I said, looking right at my daughter who was staring up at the window, horrified. And the locks are new. You have 30 minutes to collect Leo's necessary supplies and then you need to leave. You need to take George with you, and you need to return my property and pay me back every cent. I'm filing a police report about the theft. Kimberly's face crumpled. She looked devastated, and that's when the guilt hit me like a truck. The image of my tired daughter holding my grandson on the front porch of the house I owned, suddenly realizing she was homeless, was almost too much. Terry, however, went absolutely ballistic. He started pounding on the Ring doorbell. Matthew, what the fuck are you doing? We live here, we have rights, we have an arrangement, and where are we supposed to go? That is no longer my problem, Terry, I said, stepping away from the window. You lost your rights when you started stealing from me. Then George 75M came outside, having finally figured out what was happening. He marched right up to the porch, his face purple with rage. Matthew, you cannot do this. This is discrimination. My son lives here. My grandson lives here. You are neglecting your daughter. After all you've done for her, this is how you repay us. You are going to put this new mother and baby out on the street. And that's when Kimberly screamed right into the Ring camera so loud I could hear it echoing through the empty rooms. Dad, I left Leo's special formula inside. It's the last can we have. He has a dairy allergy. Matthew, please just let me get the formula. It's right by the crib. Don't be a monster. And I stood there listening to the desperate screams of my daughter begging me for vital supplies for my grandson, staring at the brand new deadbolt the locksmith had just installed, realizing I had just locked them out with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a 3-month-old baby who couldn't eat regular milk. I didn't move. I couldn't move. And then I heard the faint sound of a specific engine pulling up across the street. A pristine, expensive BMW. Brian Parker, 41M, had just arrived, right at the moment of peak chaos, and he was staring right at my house. I knew with absolute certainty that Terry had called Brian, and Brian was here to mediate or possibly confront me. I need to know, am I the asshole for prioritizing my financial survival and boundary setting over my grandson's immediate needs, even though I know I contributed to the neglect by being absent? I'm sitting here heart racing, terrified they are going to call the police on me now. I just want my life back and I want the stealing to stop. What the hell do I do? What is Brian Parker even doing here? I'm still sitting here 3 blocks away in the Honda. My windows are slightly fogged up and the temperature readout says 41 degrees. My entire body is vibrating from the adrenaline dump and the sheer volume of George's rage when he realized the new lock was real. The last thing I heard before I drove away, I literally peeled out NGL, was Kimberly screaming about the formula. That sound is stuck in my head, looped. Donsby a monster, I know what you guys are thinking. YTA Matthew, YTA for the baby formula. And you're right, maybe I am. But I need to explain the context of the formula because that small detail is what sent me into this Honda right now, typing like a maniac. The second I locked the door, I realized my mistake regarding the immediate needs of my grandson. I wasn't thinking about Leo. I was thinking about the $12,000 annual interest payment on my cardiac debt and the vintage camera collection they stole. But Leo isn't innocent, so I waited 5 minutes. I watched the Ring camera feed on my phone. Thank God I changed that password before I left. Brian Parker, 41M, was out of the BMW now, leaning against the doorframe, looking totally ripped and completely baffled. He wasn't yelling, he was just observing the chaos, arms crossed over his massive chest. Terry, 54M, was still pounding on the door, sounding like a disgruntled caveman. George, 75M, was yelling about calling the police and discrimination. Kimberly, 30F, thank God, stopped screaming. She finally managed to pry the carrier off her shoulder and set Leo down next to a potted fern. She was sobbing, digging through the diaper bag, clearly panicking. This is the part where I thought, okay, Matthew, open the door, give them the formula, and then put the lock back on. I started to reach for the phone to disarm the alarm. But then I watched the footage again. Kimberly stopped searching the bag. She looked at Terry. Terry stopped yelling and pointed to the kitchen window. George was trying to open the kitchen window, but I had put the renovation-grade security stick in the frame. DIY security tip: wood dowel rod in the track works wonders. Then Kimberly did something that makes my hands shake even now. She took the blanket off Leo's carrier, looked around right into the camera TBH, and reached into the carrier, pulled out a smaller plastic container and slipped it into the diaper bag. I zoomed in on the container. It was the formula, the expensive dairy-free special order formula. She had it the whole time. She screamed about being locked out with no formula while the formula was literally in the carrier next to her. It was a manipulation tactic, a desperate, calculated lie designed to override my guilt and get me to open the door immediately. She knew I would cave if the baby was in distress. She learned that trick from her mother-in-law, NGL. When I saw that, the guilt vanished. It was replaced by a cold, searing certainty. I am dealing with professional con artists and my daughter is fully complicit. I locked the phone screen, started the car, and drove 3 blocks. I didn't stop to argue or confront them about the lie. I realized arguing was pointless. They would just lie more. Okay, so I need to update you on what happened after that because the chaos level went from a 7 to a solid 10 over the weekend. 2 days later, Sunday afternoon, I spent the weekend at Ben's house upstate trying to decompress. Ben is my friend from the firm, a civil engineer, and he's been furious on my behalf ever since the medical debt piled up. He told me bluntly, Matthew, you're the bank. They saw you as the ATM. You need to close the ATM permanently. I check my phone constantly. The texts from Kimberly were a mix of rage and victimhood. Kimberly, Friday, 7:30 p.m. Dad, this is insane. Leo is cold. You are destroying my life over a stupid lamp. Terry, Friday 8:00 p.m. via George's burner phone. You are violating the law. We are residents here. Expect legal action. You owe us. George, Saturday 9:00 a.m. We are at a motel. The bedbugs are biting the baby. This is all on your conscience, Matthew. I looked up the motel they mentioned. It's the Holiday Inn Express near the airport. It has 4.5 stars and an indoor pool. Lies, lies, and more lies. I blocked the burner phone number. I had been worried about Brian Parker, 41M. I fully expected him, the fitness-obsessed vlogger connection, to try and show up the next day, maybe with Terry, to retrieve the cameras or demand I turn the Wi-Fi back on so Terry could upload a dramatic video about family trauma and financial destruction. But Brian surprised me. Saturday morning, I woke up to a long text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, thinking it was George. Unknown number, Matt, it's Brian Parker. Look, I saw what went down last night. I need to apologize profusely. I stared at the text. I typed, who is this? Brian Parker, Terry's fitness consultant. I was there. I saw the screaming. I also saw Kim pull the formula out of the bag after she screamed about not having it. I realized I was involved in something ugly. I didn't know the electronics box was stolen. I called Ben over and showed him. Ben squinted at the phone. This is probably a trap, don't engage, but I couldn't help myself. I needed answers about my vintage camera collection. Me, where are my cameras and the lamp? Brian Parker, the lamp went to a pawn shop near 5th Street. Terry got $120 for it. I was paid $150, the Zelle you saw, to take the camera box to a specialty collector I know downtown. I was told they were Terry's unused assets he needed to liquidate for the vlog launch. He specifically told me they were yours when I raised an eyebrow. Me, and you still took them. Brian Parker, I was trying to rebuild my own clientele. I am an independent contractor. I shouldn't have. But here's the critical part. I haven't sold the cameras yet. The collector lowballed me. Terry was insisting on getting $1,000 minimum by Sunday. I have them in my car right now. I don't want to be involved in grand larceny. I felt a surge of hope followed by intense suspicion. Was this a setup? Me, why are you telling me this? Why the sudden conscience? Brian Parker, I spent the night researching Terry McLeod. I found 4 different civil suits from clients he defrauded back when he was a financial advisor. I saw the footage of your daughter lying about the formula. This isn't just about bad boundaries, Matt. These people are professional grifters. I don't want my name or my brand associated with theft. I'm trying to go legit. The $150 isn't worth a police report. He sent me a screenshot of the cameras still in the labeled box sitting in the trunk of his BMW. Side note, the interior of that car was so clean I nearly cried. Brian Parker, I want to return your property. No police report. I want my name clean. It'll give you the pawn shop receipt for the lamp too. It shows Terry's ID. I just need to meet you somewhere neutral. Ben thought it was a trick. I didn't care. I needed those cameras. That collection included a vintage Leica that was practically irreplaceable. I arranged to meet Brian Parker, 41M, Sunday evening at a Starbucks parking lot 40 minutes away. I brought Ben as backup just in case Brian decided to use his fitness-obsessed muscles to rob me too. When Brian showed up, he was exactly as fitness-obsessed as he looked, but he was incredibly quiet and looked genuinely regretful. Matthew, I am so sorry, he said, handing me the box of electronics. I should have known better than to trust Terry. He's all talk about discipline and brand image, but he's just leveraging everyone around him. He gave me the camera box intact. He also handed me a Zelle payment confirmation for $150, refunding the consultation fee. I have nothing to do with George's investments or Kimberly's situation, Brian finished. But I realized that $150 fee was stolen from your medical debt fund. That's messed up. I can't be part of that. I was stunned. I looked at the refund, the cameras, and the detailed pawn shop receipt showing Terry's signature. Why the change of heart, Brian? I asked. He sighed. My whole life I've been trying to run away from being like my own father who was always running a scam. Terry's whole act, the vlogs, the quick cash, the arrogance, it reminded me of him. I decided I'm done enabling people. I'm focusing on my own growth, real growth, not whatever Terry was doing. This is the character development part, I guess. I still don't totally trust Brian, but he came through. TBH, he was a massive help. He even offered to testify about Terry admitting he was stealing to fund George's gambling, investments, if I needed it for the police report. I shook his hand, thanked him, and drove back to Ben's place, gripping that camera box like it was the holy grail. I was feeling a little less like an AITA monster now. I had my property back, and I had a key witness who had already paid me back his share of the theft. Fast forward to Tuesday morning. The unwelcome return. I spent Monday morning back at the firm, pretending everything was fine, trying to catch up on the work I missed. The stress was still there, but the knowledge that I had the evidence and that I had established a hard boundary was helping. I finalized the police report, listing the lamp now evidence and the $400 cash withdrawal. I hired a real estate attorney. Yes, $400 just for the first consult, more debt, fantastic, who confirmed that because Terry, Kimberly, and George didn't pay rent, weren't listed on the utilities, which I still pay because they never actually covered them, NGL, and received notice that they were guests. They had almost zero tenancy rights in my state. The lawyer told me you gave them an eviction notice verbally and their response was committing a crime. Your position is strong, Matthew. Keep the locks changed. Do not engage with them directly. I felt okay. I was eating better, sleeping slightly more, and even managed to get through an entire Zoom meeting without checking my bank balance. Then Tuesday morning, the complication hit its peak. I was finishing up my morning coffee, sitting in my now blessedly quiet living room. It smelled like old coffee and peace, not sawdust and desperation, when the Ring doorbell chimed. I looked at the feed. It wasn't Terry, it wasn't Kimberly. It was George Flores 75M. He wasn't yelling. He was wearing a ridiculously nice suit, the kind I haven't seen him in since his daughter's wedding, and he was holding a briefcase. He looked completely composed, almost smug. He rang the bell again. I didn't answer the door, but I activated the microphone. George, the locks are changed. You need to leave, I said, trying to sound as lawyerly as the guy who just charged me $400. George cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. Matthew, I need to come in. I'm here to settle the debt and discuss the future living arrangement. I almost laughed. There is no future living arrangement, George, and you can Zelle me the $400 you stole. This is better than Zelle, George said, holding up a thick manila envelope. I need to discuss the renovation and my grandson. I hesitated. The attorney told me not to engage, but the word debt got me. If he was returning the money, I needed that for my payment this week. Drop the envelope in the mailbox, I instructed. I need to discuss the renovation contracts face-to-face, Matthew, George insisted. I have something you need to see. I can't leave this out here. It's too sensitive. Against my better judgment, against everything Brian, Ben, and the lawyer had told me, I cracked the door open, keeping the security chain fully locked. I was not letting him in. George's face, usually purple with rage or contempt, was surprisingly calm. He slid the envelope through the opening, and then before I could shut the door, he put his foot in the gap. Just let me tell you one thing, Matthew, George said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Terry's vlog plan is about to pay off. We don't need your money anymore. In fact, we're going to be buying you out of this house. I blinked. You're delusional, George. You can barely afford a Holiday Inn Express. George chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. We have an investor, a big one. Terry convinced Brian Parker to invest $50,000 into the Dad Bod to God Bod series, and they're using this house as the backdrop for the first 3 months of filming. We're getting an immediate $15,000 payment. That's why Terry was so desperate for the camera equipment. He needed to finance the pilot episode immediately. Wait, what? Brian Parker returned my cameras 2 days ago, George. He paid me back the money Terry stole, and he told me everything. He knows Terry is a fraud. He even gave me a pawn shop receipt. George's composure finally cracked. His jaw dropped. That little snake, he was supposed to be our financial lifeline. He swore he was on board. Brian has a conscience, George, something you and Terry seem to be lacking, I snapped. Doesn't matter, George hissed, leaning closer, pushing slightly against the door. We already signed a preliminary agreement using your renovation permits and your address. That vlog is happening here whether you like it or not, and we're going to make you miserable until you sell us this dump. You have absolutely zero right to use my house for anything, I said, slamming the door shut with surprising force, nearly crushing his toe. I relocked the deadbolt and stumbled back into the living room, heart hammering. I grabbed the manila envelope and tore it open. Inside, there was $400 in cash, confirming he knew exactly how much he stole. There was also a copy of the renovation contract. My name, Matthew Coleman, was clearly listed as the homeowner, but underneath my signature line, there was a new document stapled to the back. It was a poorly constructed, handwritten contract signed by Terry MacLeod, stating that he was the project manager for the renovation and that he authorized the use of the property for commercial filming purposes, specifically citing the MacLeod Method Fitness series. I flipped through the pages. The document was dated 3 days after they moved in, and the witness signature, Kimberly Flores, my own daughter. I sank onto the floor, clutching the contract. They weren't just stealing money and lamps. They were trying to steal the actual use of my house, banking on the fact that I was too exhausted and in too much medical debt to fight back. They were going to monetize my biggest financial burden, and Kimberly helped them forge the contract. The neglect I felt, the loneliness, the stress was suddenly dwarfed by this monumental betrayal. This wasn't about being tired, this was about being systematically targeted. 2 weeks later, privacy settings max activated. I am typing this update from Ben's spare bedroom. I've effectively moved out of my own house, temporarily NGL. Why? Because after the George confrontation, I realized I couldn't be there without my blood pressure spiking to a dangerous level every time the Ring doorbell rang. I had to go into maximum defense mode. My lawyer, bless his expensive heart, helped me implement the actual privacy settings max plan. Step 1, the temporary move. I gave Ben $500 for a month's rent for his guest room. It's tiny, but it's safe and quiet. I can finally sleep. Step 2, legal deterrence. My lawyer sent George, Terry, and Kimberly a cease and desist letter, attaching the police report number and specifically citing the fake contract George presented. The letter stated that any further attempt to trespass or use the property would result in immediate arrest and charges of attempted fraud. Step 3, utility control. This was messy. Since I paid all the bills anyway they lied about covering utilities, I changed the electrical and gas service into Ben's name for a temporary period and then shut off the service to my house entirely, citing ongoing renovation and safety concerns. Yes, this is extreme, but they needed to feel the consequences of not having basic shelter. I knew they couldn't stay at the Holiday Inn forever. Step 4, the communication black hole. I didn't just block them on my personal phone. I changed my work phone number and told my assistant to filter any calls related to the old address. They were now cut off entirely. The immediate reaction was exactly what you'd expect: anarchy. I heard the fallout through Frank, the plumber, who is also my unofficial neighborhood watch. Terry showed up at the house again Thursday afternoon, trying to set up a camera tripod on the porch. The audacity. Frank saw him, called me, and I called the non-emergency police line immediately, citing the trespassing and the active police report. Terry was absolutely furious when the police showed up. He tried to claim tenancy rights, waving around that fake contract he and Kimberly signed. The police officer took one look at the stamped letter from my lawyer, saw the active theft report, and told Terry, "You need to vacate the premises immediately, or you will be arrested for trespassing and attempted fraud. This man is the owner and you have no legal residency here." Frank said Terry actually started sobbing, yelling about how the police were suppressing his entrepreneurial spirit and ruining his brand launch. I wish I was joking. He drove away in the beat-up Corolla, threatening to make a viral video about police brutality and housing discrimination. George, meanwhile, had found the perfect tool for manipulation, Leo. I received a text from an anonymous number that just contained a photo of baby Leo looking genuinely upset, wrapped in a thin blanket at a park bench. Anonymous text: "Your grandson is cold, Matthew. He is hungry. You forced us out. We have nowhere to go. Don't let your own bitterness hurt an innocent child. I'm contacting Child Protective Services." I froze. This was the nuclear option. My biggest fear was someone questioning my capabilities as a guardian or grandfather, especially given the history of neglect. I showed the text to Ben, who immediately got practical. "CPS won't care if you locked out grifters," Ben said, "but you need to look proactive. You need to show you care about Leo, even if you hate his parents. The fact that you drove out of there with the cameras and the formula lie in your head proves you're not negligent." We did something crazy. We drove to the park George mentioned. I recognized the fountain and I stayed in the car while Ben, who looks very professional and responsible, walked over. Ben approached Kimberly, who was sitting next to George, scrolling on her phone, looking totally miserable. Terry was filming a very dramatic selfie rant nearby. "Kimberly Flores?" Ben asked, holding up his firm ID badge. "Matthew Coleman asked me to bring you something." He handed her a huge Target bag. Inside were 3 cans of the expensive special formula, a new baby blanket, and a $200 gift card to a major grocery store chain. Kimberly looked up, confused. George looked livid. "Matthew wanted to ensure his grandson was fed," Ben said, maintaining eye contact. "He's doing his part as a grandfather. However, he is also aware of the attempted contract fraud and the theft. If you continue to harass him or misuse his property, he will pursue the maximum penalty. If you contact CPS, he will share the ring footage of you lying about the formula and the police report showing Terry's theft. Choose wisely." Ben is an absolute genius. Kimberly's face went white. She snatched the Target bag and they left the park immediately. The attempted CPS threat vanished. 1 month later, aftermath and processing. A month has passed since the great lockout. I'm still at Ben's place, but I'm going back to the house every day now to supervise the renovation, which is finally moving along because Terry isn't there demanding to be project manager. The financial pressure is still crushing, TBH. The lawyer bill is mounting, and while I got the $400 cash back from George, I still had to pay the $347 overdraft and the plumber's fees. My medical debt interest payment is due next week, and I'm stressed NGL. But there are massive improvements. 1. Peace. The silence in my house is priceless. I actually enjoy coming home. I've started cooking again. I even laughed at a stupid cat video on TikTok yesterday and didn't feel guilty about it. 2. The vlog. Terry MacLeod's 54M Dad Bod to God Bod series never launched on YouTube. He had banked everything on Brian Parker's 41M investment. After Brian backed out and the police got involved, Terry's reputation, which was already tenuous after the financial advisor scandal, cratered among the local fitness influencers. I checked his channel. He's now vlogging about minimalist van life on a budget. I assume he's living in the Corolla. 3. George Flores, 75M. George is living with Terry and Kimberly in the tiny 1-bedroom apartment near downtown, which they were forced to rent after the motel bill became astronomical. I know this because my friend Frank saw his beat-up Toyota parked there. George is apparently furious, blaming Terry for ruining his investments and Kimberly for not sticking up for her family. 4. Kimberly Flores, 30F. This is the hardest part. My daughter. She hasn't called or texted since the park confrontation with Ben. I sent her one text, a long one, not accusing, but just explaining the betrayal. Me 3 weeks ago. Kimberly, I locked the door because I saw you participate in the theft of my belongings and the attempted fraud of my home. You didn't ask me about the lamp, you took it. You didn't tell me about the contract, you forged it. You lied about the formula. I know you were tired and neglected and I owe my absence, but you chose to steal from the person funding your life. I love you, but I cannot be leveraged anymore. My health cannot afford it. When you are ready to be honest about the theft and the fraud, and when you are ready to admit you need help, I will talk. Until then, the boundary is permanent. I will continue to ensure Leo is cared for, but through neutral channels. She left me on read. I have established an official Leo Fund account where I deposit money solely for his future and needs, diapers, college, etc. I Zelle money to Kimberly's account once a week, explicitly labeled for Leo needs only. It's my way of separating the relationship with my grandson from the toxic relationship with my daughter. I still feel immense sadness and regret over the postpartum neglect. I should have seen how exhausted Kimberly was. I should have been there to help her, instead of working 60 hours a week to manage debt that ultimately just created a vacuum for grifters to exploit. My absence created the perfect storm for Terry and George to swoop in, promising quick fixes and financial freedom while stealing from me. But I realize now, providing money and shelter isn't the same as providing support. And genuine support doesn't involve lying about baby formula to emotionally blackmail someone. The most important realization I've had is about the debt. The medical debt is the source of my terror, and that terror allowed me to ignore every single red flag, every condescending comment, and every violation of boundaries because I thought I needed them there for financial relief. I don't need them. The cost of their help was higher than the debt itself. I'm still Matthew Coleman, 58M, still drowning in 6-figure medical debt, but I am doing something I should have done 4 years ago. I am finally talking to a financial counselor about restructuring the entire debt payment plan, minimizing the interest, and actually breathing again. I haven't talked to Kimberly. Maybe I want for a long time. Maybe our relationship is permanently fractured. I have to live with that. But I am prioritizing my health and my boundaries, and that's something I never thought I was allowed to do. I'm back in my house next week. I'm putting a lock on the refrigerator too. I don't trust anyone now, TBH. AITA for the lockout. Maybe a little bit for the execution, but given the massive betrayal and the absolute certainty that they were going to keep stealing from me until I died from stress, I think NTA. The privacy settings are max, and for the first time in years, I feel like my life is actually mine again. It's messy, it hurts, but it's mine. Anyway, that's the update. We'll let you know if Terry tries to film his van life vlog in my driveway. I wouldn't put it past him.